means of transport mark our life with their memories, but also through the circumstances that brought them and the transformation that occurred in them. As if the car wants to tell us the stage that the country has experienced of era and events that people experienced.
It's a normal morning in Baghdad, where I go to work, like the rest of the population. And of course, I cross the busiest neighborhood from Bab al-Mu'azzam to Bab al-Sharqi, which is also one of the oldest neighborhoods of Baghdad, via Jumhuriya Street. The street was paved in 1959, and for this reason, many houses were demolished. At that time, the painter Lorna Salim were living in Baghdad, and she documented this event through a beautiful painting in which she rendered homage to these old houses of Baghdad. As soon as I arrive in Bab al-Mu'azzam, my ideal means of transport appears before me, the Volga cars, which have been circulating here since the 60s of the last century, transporting people between the two gates of Baghdad, Al-Mu'azzam and Al-Sharqi. A relatively spacious car, but it's old, and yet it drives silently and continuously between traffic jams, the movement of people turning in this orbit. In addition to its tireless work, the Volga car is in fact a documentation of an important era in Iraqi history, a time when Iraq moved closer to the socialist camp, and during which it became one of the Russian bear's closest friends. After the collapse of the monarchy and the collapse of the Baghdad Pact, Khrushchev's Moscow embraced Abdul Karim Qasim's coup in 1958. And then it supported Iraq and armed it so that this beautiful Volga enters the street of Iraq and spreads into this environment. Volga, a beautiful name that speaks of the most beautiful river in Russia. In 1960s, cars had humped-backs and moved at enormous speed, as if they were desert camels. Hence, people called it the camel. It bears this name to this day, although its back has strengthened in the following model, and despite the difference between the desert of the south and the snow of the north.
The steering wheel was distinctive. It was a beautiful block of ivory, which was turning under the hands driver. And I was dazzled by its shine under the rays of the sun. The gear lever was small and hung next to the steering wheel, leaving more space for passengers and giving nice movement to the driver.
The 60s model disappeared while the 1970s model remains to this day, and even the manufacturing country liked this model and didn't modify it much. As usually, I got in quickly to huddle with the passengers. Then I looked out the window to see the pupil and express train of shows that was moving in front of me, to see beautiful images of a big world centered on various goods, including fabrics, perfumes, among others. The car passes through Baghdad's most important markets, Al-Sharjah, Al-Ghazal spinning market, and Al-Dahan, and the oldest and most important neighborhoods, Al-Midan, Al-Tahiran, and Al-Tamara. It passes between the mosque of the caliphs and the Latin Church, a world that reminds us of people who had lived there before us in harmony and great social understanding. The Volga was linked to this line. When we move away from these two gates, we rarely found it. This road is its main environment. She continues to turn here, as if refusing to rest. Perhaps she had no choice, so we call the street Volga Street. It was riding and we were riding with it. Our features and shapes transform over time, and the Volga turns and we turn with it, as if it were happy in this labyrinth. The driver chose a nice channel, turning the fingers of the right hand on the volume of his old radio, and chose the soft voice of a nice presenter. whose soft voice reached our ears despite the crackle of his old and beautiful radio. She speaks of a beautiful and optimistic morning, supporting her presentation with beautiful quotes, beautiful thoughts, so that she shortens the busy road, crowded with porters, sailors, and passers-by. And when she stops talking, the voices of passers-by, those who work, cars, horns, attack us, until she returns with her beautiful and melodious voice, so that we return and dive with her superficial ideas, imbued with a beautiful, light philosophy. I get off, one of the passengers said to get out of the car. Then another passenger got in his place, carrying a big bag. He sat it on his lap, and we return with the presenter of the show and her chosen collection of beautiful songs, which we hear while looking out at the landscape. And visitors from the past cross the stage, jumping out of the car windows and getting lost into the crowd. I smile and quickly forget a quick need to meet someone I have missed for a long time before smiling at this beautiful inspiration. Another passenger says, I am getting off. Oh, I have to get off first. I open the door and I enter after the passenger exit. In this rapid movement, I notice that he has disappeared into the crowd. And I go back to sit down, and the place becomes more comfortable with the reduced number of passengers. Then the traffic jam stops the car, and lines of smoke coming from the exhaust pass, and lines of smoke coming from the exhaust pass, and lines of smoke coming from the exhaust pass through the window, so that we see the air go from its transparent state to its grey state. We trace it and follow its path. Then it disappears with the movement of the car. Then we get out of the car to get lost in the city traffic, and the Volga car gets lost in a routine and repetitive world. As if it were a moving beehive, we leave the car, catching its breath and preparing for the return journey to resume its slow movement. And we continue to our destination, leaving the Volga car and its meditative session, only to have it return to repeat the same repeated journey, rushing into the same crowd and the same tumultuous world.
We leave the Volga River, and it's a nice car. It's a treat and one of its daily sessions. The car for me is a testimony of an era, a memory that refuses to disappear while defying the circumstances, the most important of which is time. Goodbye.